I know a couple by the name of, well, we'll make them up, Susie and Jorge. I'm having a Latin moment. Having serious problems in their marriage. And for a year, she's been begging him to do an intervention. I mean, this marriage is seriously flawed. Just about nothing goes right. So the idea whether it should be an intervention or something else really is not a question. And of course, he fights and kicks and resists and criticizes her, and she always gives in. And of course, that's why he keeps fighting, kicking, resisting, and criticizing. That's why people behave badly, is so that you'll give them what they want. And she does, which is to do nothing and put up with this fighting, kicking, and resisting. So she persisted long enough that he thought he ought to come up with something. So he came up with the idea of seeing a local counselor. She asked me what I thought. Part of me was thinking, what difference does it make? Because he's going to do what he wants to do. So I said, well, you know, at least try whatever he'll do. But this man has a list of issues and problems and addictions a mile long. And I mean, the kind of thing that people go to intensive 90-day inpatient treatment centers for. And the odds that a local counselor once a week is going to make a difference is close to zero. Because you go to counseling for an hour, then you're out of counseling for 167 hours of doing the same old stuff, including the addictions, and you go back for an hour. So guess what happens? Nothing, which is why people do inpatient treatment programs, is to break the cycle. So they went to the counselor 2 times. And she said, well, he didn't seem to mind. And so she asked me if I didn't think that was kind of miraculous progress. And this is understandable because we want there to be progress. And so we want people to tell us that there's progress. We want to believe that there's progress. Going 2 times doesn't mean anything any more than an alcoholic skipping 2 beers means something. So I asked her, did the counselor talk about your husband's anger or his many addictions or his attacking? She said, well, no. Well, then, of course he didn't mind it because the counselor didn't talk to him, but he's also not learning anything. And then after going for 2 sessions, her husband on the way home from the second one said, you know, I think maybe we don't need to go so often. After 2, which proves what I've been saying all along, which is he doesn't want to change. He was only going to the counselor to get her off his back. So she writes and says, we went to see the counselor again tonight, 3rd time, 3 whole times. She said, I feel pretty vulnerable and a little upset. I mean, we talked about with the counselor about what happened the last few days where I said something unkind and Jorge was then upset for days after me saying a single sentence. Jorge said in the car that he feels accused and blamed by me. And that's one of the ways he's always controlled you, kid. He acts like a victim. He claims that you have made him angry. Then he gets angry, and he does that so that you will stop making him uncomfortable with the truth. He hates the truth about himself and his addictions and his attacking. So he simply denies it and blames it all on you. Denies his anger, denies his addictions, denies his lack of responsibility. And if you dare to bring it up, then you're being mean. That's his definition of mean, is that you would dare to bring up the truth. No, you're simply holding him accountable for his behavior, which he hates. Yes, to be fair, sometimes you are unkind. And obviously, you need to be more aware of that and learn to do it differently. But he uses your unkindness, however slight, he uses anything less than perfection from you to excuse all the truth, to dismiss it, to dismiss all the truth in what you say. You continue. He said it wasn't just the words I used, but the fact that he feels silently blamed all the time. That's what made him angry. The counselor started talking about empathy and how things could look like from another person's perspective. You see how masterful your husband is? If you're even just less than perfect in pointing out what he does, then he blames you for that. If you say nothing, then you silently blame him. He's set up a system where he's never held accountable at all. And now the counselor is joining in with him and saying how you should be more empathetic. Well, yeah, you should be more understanding. But in the meantime, until you're perfect, his addictions and attacking continue, and they're not being addressed by anybody, because if the counselor sees how your husband attacks you, counselors don't like to be attacked either. Virtually every counselor that I know of is like everybody else. They're cowards. And so they address the person who would be least likely to attack them. That's what we all do. You say, I admitted to silently blaming Jorge for all my problems, but that's been a constant struggle for me not to do that. But I'm doing my best to change it and take responsibility for my own happiness. Yes, I know you're doing your best. Yes, you do some blaming. You're not perfect, but he can't keep using your imperfection to excuse an entire lifetime of addictions. I mean, this guy's a walking addiction book. You say, I know the counselor said a lot of things similar to real love, but I became vulnerable. Now I'm kind of upset. I hated that the focus was on me and I'm the one who did the emotional work. I understand. You were opened up emotionally by the counselor, but then not healed, which is one of the inherent problems with therapy. Therapists are great at describing problems, helping you see what's wrong, but then they don't know how to love you because they weren't loved themselves. So they dissect you, but then they don't sew you back up or help you heal. Very unsatisfying. And as long as you're doing work and Jorge isn't required to do his own, well, he never will. He'll use it as an excuse to blame you. And when he is required to do his work by the counselor, that's when he'll hate that counselor and he'll leave and either refuse to go back to therapy or find a counselor that he can deceive. Now, to all of those who are listening, what's the main purpose of my bringing this up? Because all of her life, she's been taught to accept the blame. My goal here isn't to blame him more. It's to point out that just because she's not perfect, it's not her responsibility to take all the blame for the problems in the relationship, which is what her husband's been doing for 10 years. Here's somebody who said, I had a very interesting talk with, and he named one of the coaches last night. He helped me see how often I act out of fear of disapproval or a need to earn approval, which, well, almost everybody does almost all the time. It's that common. He told me that a loving relationship can only be between two people making independent, loving decisions. Otherwise, it's basically crap and neither partner can feel loved. This makes sense to me. The problem is that I'm realizing that I have no idea how to do it. The real statement in the book is a little cleaner. It says a relationship's a natural result. A relationship, any relationship, is a natural result of two people making independent decisions. But see, although we always have a right to make independent decisions, we have to pay the price for making those independent decisions. Hence, if independently we make loving decisions, then we end up with a loving relationship. If we don't, if we make independent decisions that are unloving, then our relationship will be crap. You continue. Isn't this an oxymoron? Independent and loving seem to contradict each other. Now, I've been getting emails from all over the world about this subject lately, so somebody apparently is misquoting this somewhere. We somehow can't put together independent and loving. People can only picture independent and selfish, or they picture dependent and a doormat. I independently choose to love Donna. What's the result of that? I'm happy. She independently chooses to love me. Result, she is happy. If we both independently choose to be loving, then we have a loving relationship. Why? Because it's the natural result of two people making loving decisions. The emphasis is on the word loving. Whereas people who want to justify their selfishness tend to emphasize the word independent. People, love to say, I want to be independent. Yeah, we want to be independent, but then we don't want to pay the price for our choices. So I want to independently be a selfish pig while my partner is loving to me, despite the fact that I'm selfish. You continue. When does independent become selfish? Again, notice how you think independence and selfishness are even linked. They're not. You join them because the world equates independence with selfishness. You see the guy who's sitting on the back of his horse, smoking the Marlboro all by himself. He's the independent, strong man. And the people that we point to as independent, strong people, with almost non-existent exceptions, are selfish. That's what independent has come to mean. That's really kind of regrettable. We can't conceive of independently making loving decisions about another person, thinking about somebody else. Because if I'm thinking about somebody else, then I'm not really independent, am I? Yes, I can be. But because the world hasn't seen that, we're just really screwed up in this world. Selfish is selfish. Whether it's independent is a separate question. So selfish means thinking of myself to the exclusion or detriment of other people. There can be an unhealthy and a healthy selfishness. For example, is a baby selfish? Yeah, because he thinks of himself to the exclusion of others. Well, but see, that's healthy in a baby. Babies aren't supposed to have to think about other people. That's healthy selfishness. Whereas the selfishness in adult relationships is almost never healthy. Now, if somebody's first learning real love and they've got a coach, if I'm first coaching somebody in real love and they're just learning what unconditional love is, then I assume a parental role with that person. I choose independently to love them without expecting anything from them in return. And some people will go in the beginning, well, I feel really uncomfortable not giving you something back. I'll bet you do, because all of your life you had to give something back. And I'm telling you, in this circumstance, it's healthy to be selfish, because I don't want you to be thinking about what you give me in return. Not at all. In fact, I often encourage people to cling in the beginning, to get all the love they can, like a nursing baby would. That's healthy selfishness. But in a partnership, there's no healthy selfishness. It's impossible. These are two people attempting to be partners in all things. You can't be a selfish partner. As soon as you're selfish, you're not a partner. You continue. I don't know where the lines are. I can only do something lovingly if it's freely given. You can just hear the sophistry on its way. I get that. What I'm realizing is that I hardly ever make a decision without considering my wife's opinion or reaction. Now that sounds like a good thing. But how do I know if that is being loving or considerate, or if I'm acting out of fear and approval seeking? That's the question. That's the important question. Because we tend to justify our selfishness by saying, well, but I have to make my choice lovingly. I have to make my choice independently. I have to do it on my own. I have to freely give it. And so then what we do is say, well, I can't freely give it, so I'm just not going to. And we keep using it as an excuse rather than a simple assessment. I tell people who are very new in real love and have never had any experience with being loved, of course you can't give to anybody else freely because you don't have it to give. But even after some people have gotten enough unconditional love, like the writer of this letter, they then look for reasons to justify their selfishness by saying, well, I can't really give it freely, so I won't give it at all. And I'm not criticizing the writer here. I'm just saying it's a common excuse. Here's the problem. It's not about independence. It's not about selfishness. It's about fear. You're afraid of your wife. All of these questions have been a distraction from this. That's the problem. And you're afraid of the disapproval of everybody else. And because you're afraid of people, you can't give freely. You have the same trouble with your children. and with others. This whole thing isn't about independence or selfishness. It's about fear, which, one, makes you selfish. It's the fear that makes you selfish. And two, it also makes you not independent because you depend when you're afraid on the approval of others. Do you see? So by using words like independence and selfishness, and it just all seems to be a muddle, and that's because we're ignoring the underlying real problem, fear. Now, why is it important to get to fear? Because the solution is love. Love eliminates the fear, which eliminates the selfishness, which eliminates your dependence on everybody else's approval. And now that you have enough love, now you can independently choose not to be selfish and to give freely. We ask the wrong questions, is what I'm saying. And if what I've said up to this point seems really complicated and a muddle, I did it intentionally, because that's how we get. Independence and selfishness and codependency and giving freely, and people tie themselves in knots. Are you afraid? Yes. Then you're screwed. Then you are selfish. You will be. And you will be dependent all the time, and you can't possibly choose to give freely. Love solves it all. You say, I've done this with everybody my whole life, which I said earlier, and with my wife throughout all of our years together, so it gets confusing. It feels like the ground is shifting underneath me. Good for you to at least sense that this is a momentous thing. If you understand that it's about fear and that the solution is love, everything will change. And it's not about understanding in the head. It's not about words. It's not about a bunch of questions. Donna just got off a conference call a little bit ago, if I remember, where somebody was asking questions. And the problem is everybody is seduced by the cleverness of these questions. But see, the same people tend to ask the same questions over and over and over again. And now more and more when people ask me the same question for the 10th time, I go, nah, I'm not going to be fooled by this. You answer the question. It's not about answering questions or books or video chats. It's about trusting somebody to love you. Until you trust somebody to love you, pick somebody. Till you trust that God loves you, till you know that your world is rock solid on love, till you know who you are, you'll be selfish. Once you have those things, sufficient love and a rock solid understanding of who you are, you can freely choose to freely give love to your partner. Until then, you really can't. Another lady just minutes ago, before I got on the video chat, was calling and was just in a fit with her partner because he was irritated that she simply asked him a question. And I said, you didn't just ask him a question. She said, yes, I did. It was priceless. I said, you couldn't have. Well, how do you know? You weren't here? Well, honey, you're attacking me right now, and I wasn't even involved in the argument. So if you're attacking me as an uninvolved third party, what are the odds that you didn't attack your partner? 0. As long as we're afraid, we will attack people, we will be victims, we will be unloving, and we're screwed. I said, as long as you're afraid, there's no way you can ask a question. So what did she say? Oh, so I can never be afraid? Well, no, I didn't say that either. But if you're afraid, you can't ask a question. You can't make an objection. You can't make an observation, and you can't make a suggestion. If you're afraid, all you can do is attack and be unloving, or run, or any of the other protective behaviors. We got to get rid of the fear, and almost invariably get rid of the fear not with the person that we're presently attacking. We've already screwed it up with them. Do it with somebody else. That's what wise men are for. Young lady, different question. Been experiencing lately a young lady, and I talked about her I think more than once, who's demonstrating an exceptional faith in real love. A lady who was shut up in the box of her room, a 10 by 10 room, or I don't know the dimensions. Her life was constricted to no contact and no feeling except for fear. Did an intervention. She trusted. She got a job, started practicing being herself, and it's been a miracle. Now, follow this progression. I told all of you that before, I think. She said, in one conversation that I had with her, I told her how grateful I was for her job. She said, "Why are you grateful for my job?" "Because it's giving you a great opportunity to practice being yourself. You've got a little mommy at work. She has a lady sits across from her desk who just kind of mothers her and shows her how to do the new tasks. She has a supervisor who's tolerant. She has the business owner who's patient with her mistakes." I said, "I'm just grateful you have this place to practice being you, to practice gaining confidence, and to flourish." And she said, I didn't give her these words. She said, "I will take your gratitude for my own and feel more grateful at work." That's an example of 8. I said 2, 4, 6. Poof, she went straight to 8. She was going to take my gratitude and own it. Made a huge difference at work. 2 days later, she says, "I'm feeling affection for my boss." Not just gratitude, but affection. Is that wrong? Is this people-pleasing? Am I currying favor with him? I said, wow, again. Gratitude naturally leads to affection. Now, is there some element of people-pleasing in there? Oh yeah, probably, because in your past, any positive feelings towards somebody would only have come with adequate trading. You please them, they like you, so sure, you'll carry some past behaviors with you. But so what? If you're experiencing some gratitude and some genuine affection, if there's some people-pleasing in there, who cares? Rejoice in the good stuff. Pure gold, for example, is 24 karat gold, but almost every gold you see in jewelry stores and other places is less than that. You virtually never see 24 karat gold except, say, in gold bars in Fort Knox. 12 karat gold would be 50% gold. 18 karat gold, 75% gold. If I gave you a great big lump, a pound of 18 karat gold, would you throw it away because it was 25% impure, because there was copper or brass or nickel in it? No. You'd be grateful for the 75%. Same with behaviors. The motivations are always mixed, like alloying gold. Rejoice in the gold. Rejoice in your progress. And just notice the imperfections. And bit by bit, you'll get rid of them. Here's a story about Zoe, who's, at the time that I got the story, 14 months old. Who knows how old she is now? I can't keep track of my own grandkids' age, not to the nearest month. Her mom says, "Tonight we were at a Halloween event and I was drinking apple cider while carrying Zoe. I offered her some, but she didn't want any. But she started dipping her hands in the cider. You know how kids do. They stick their hands in, well, everything. And then in my mouth to try to feed me. Most parents I know would never get a chance to see if children have these natural giving tendencies, because they would immediately start screaming at the kid the second they put their fingers in the drink. That's a brilliant observation. We over-control our kids. Don't make a mess. Don't do this. Don't do that. Don't touch the... So here's a kid making a naturally giving gesture that you couldn't teach. It's really her. And most parents would be worried about the mess and miss out on the giving. You have to also kind of in your mind erase some of the other places the kid's hand could have been. But it's worth it. Letting children make choices on their own is just priceless. That's how they gain genuine confidence. If you're always telling them what to do, it erodes their confidence to nothing. And then they do what a couple did when I talked to him 2 days ago. Every time I asked this, I was talking to a man and a woman, every time I asked the woman for her opinion about anything, before she'd answer, she'd look over at him to make sure she said the right thing. She was criticized and controlled all of her life, so she had no opinion of herself, no self-confidence. Here's a coach who says, I spent time with a 51-year-old guy, we'll call him John, about a year ago who'd left his wife and 2 sons and had started a relationship with a 21-year-old girl, Susie, who already had a child under age 2 with yet another guy whom she had left completely. And her child had a serious chronic illness, I think, 1.5-year-old kid. When we start finding happiness the wrong ways, it just gets messy fast. Coach continues. Neither of them was remotely ready for a relationship with anybody. No surprise, since neither of them at age 51 and 21 had ever had a successful relationship. They'd left every relationship they'd had. So I recommended that they separate immediately and start working on themselves. Brilliant advice from a coach, seldom followed. I see this all the time. Separate immediately, and then a year later, they write me and they say it's much, much worse. And about half the time they say, yeah, we know, you told us to separate a year ago. The coach says, I heard nothing for 6 months and then got an email asking for help because the relationship wasn't going well. Shocking. I get asked all the time how people can make an impossible relationship or situation work. Answer, you can't. Essentially, people ask me how they can wade through an enormous mud hole in shorts and a t-shirt without getting muddy. Answer, well, you can't. And then they respond, but we really want to. Yeah, I got that. And you still can't. Doesn't matter how much you want to. The coach says, I told them that they needed an intervention. I didn't hear any more for another 6 months. Then he called again and asked if he could see me urgently. See, the longer we wait to do what we really need to do, the worse it gets. He told me he was at the end of his tether with life and that Susie is now 3 months pregnant. See, now we've got another problem to deal with. Not just the relationship, now we have a pregnancy. Which is why I tell people not to wait when they're mired in mud or drowning. I mean, why wait? Because you hope the mud will go away? Or because dry land will suddenly appear under your feet? And yet, yeah, that's exactly what people hope. But it never happens, like as in ever. Act now. Like the lady that I was talking about earlier, Susie and Jorge. I told her, act now. She waited. She waited, so now they're in conventional therapy and that's not working, and then they'll wait some more, and then eventually she'll get pregnant with another child. It just gets worse and worse. The coach said, John said he couldn't cope with the thought of being a new father at his age, 51, but somehow he tolerated having unprotected sex with someone who is younger than his youngest child. We want to make stupid choices, but then we don't want the consequences of them. And I understand that. It's completely understandable. I want to be able to jump off a cliff and feel the wind whistling through my hair, but I don't want to experience landing at the bottom. The universe has laws like gravity, and so does happiness. You break them, you pay the price. The coach says John has recently revealed news of his girlfriend's pregnancy to his ex-wife, and now she and his 2 sons, who are old enough to understand this, want no more to do with him. Quite a mess, but one that I predicted for him 12 months ago. It's like watching from a distance as 2 trains steam toward each other, knowing there's not a thing you can do. The coach, aside from the fact that they both need a lot of loving, does the advice to part company that I gave them twice change now that a pregnancy is involved? Ooh, good question. Do you ever mention termination or abortion as an option for people? Have you ever advised it? I've never advised abortion. I have listed it in the options only because to not do that would be disingenuous. It would be dishonest. Then I list the advantages and disadvantages of all the options that I provide. Abortion has horrifying emotional effects on almost all women who have them. They tend to carry this guilt around with them for the rest of their lives. No kidding. How many hundred women have been here, and I've heard their confessions of everything. Sex with the neighbors, with their fathers, with their brothers, with their sisters, with everybody. And yet the last thing that they'll confess, the one on the last day where they come and they say, there's just one more. It's the one that is most shameful to them, tends to be the abortion that they had 15 years ago. Surveys have demonstrated that 7 out of 10 women who get abortions regret them openly, nearly all the rest privately. So I uniformly tell people in such circumstances that, and this is hardly a unique one, that the best choice is this, which I, in the end, almost state as the only reasonable choice, because it's the choice that has the least emotional consequences to everybody who's involved. I still say separate right now, like right now and permanently. No emails, no texts, no visiting, no phone calls, no carrier pigeons, nothing. It doesn't get easier. Separate. The tension between these people, these two people that the coach is talking about, is killing them. And it's killing the young child. And the tension has been shown to demonstrate an effect on the unborn fetus. Number 2, have the baby. So they're separated, so she'll be having the baby alone. Then give the baby up for adoption. I realize that there are people who would disagree with this. I don't care. I was asked what my opinion was. The demand for kids who don't come from large orphanages and who don't have congenital defects and who don't come from places that we don't even know about is huge. Healthy young babies who are taken away at birth and given to the adoptive parents, it's adoptive parents' dream. In the United States, at least, the list is so long that pretty much they tell parents, forget about it, it's not going to happen. It used to be that the numbers were something like 7 out of 10, this was before abortions were common, 7 out of 10 babies of unwed mothers were given up for adoption. Now it's way less than 1 in 10. The mothers keep them. More accurately, the mothers don't keep them. The mothers have them and then hand them over to their mothers. It's a huge disservice to everyone when a 15-year-old girl decides, oh, with this emotional little syrupy tone in her voice, I want to keep my baby, which means she wants somebody to love her. And then when she discovers that doesn't work out, she hands her over to her mother or aunt, and the child is raised up by these older people who didn't really want him in the first place, and mother who clearly didn't want the child. Under no circumstances on earth is the baby, the 21-year-old here, who's really emotionally a baby, to keep another baby to ruin. It just makes no sense at all. The coach says, seems like a 21-year-old who is struggling to cope with a chronically ill child already under 2 years old doesn't need another brand new baby or to be in a relationship with an emotionally stunted 51-year-old guy who uses her as much as she uses him. Hence my recommendations. We just get in such messes when we make stupid decisions. And you know, almost every time we make stupid decisions because we didn't know any better. But if people come to us and they ask us what would be a wiser choice, we kind of have an obligation to give them smarter choices and to sometimes even be fairly emphatic. I was on the phone with a couple today they were in the midst of arguing just a couple hours ago about something, and they were doing the same arguing they'd done many times. And I finally just shouted into the phone because they were screaming at each other. I shouted just loud enough that they could hear me. If they didn't want to hear me, then I'd been only too happy to go away. And I finally said, I didn't call you. You called me. So do you want to argue without me, or do you want to listen? People really don't know what to do. They finally listened and managed to work out their disagreement when they were listening. Sometimes we have to be pretty strong about giving suggestions because they really don't know. Here's somebody that says, today I'm extra spicy with people, and that means like extra irritable. It's the first time I've heard the term spicy. not applied to chili or Thai dishes. For whatever reason, I'm remembering the past, PCSD, and all the erroneous judgments that I've made. When anyone disagrees or questions me about something I receive, it's as though they're dismissing me. I hear it as, you're stupid, you don't know what you're talking about. Over the last 2 to 3 years, I've become a master at being both right and firing contempt at other people. Understandable. Once that helped you to survive, but it's not working well now, which is the definition of PCSD. We learn behaviors that would help us survive. That's where people get PTSD. Soldiers in war get a reactive hypervigilance that helps to preserve their lives. I mean, you want to be hypervigilant when you're going from house to house in Kabul, and you could be killed at any second. Hypervigilance serves you beautifully. When you go home with your wife and child, it turns out that hypervigilance isn't nearly as funny. When you reach over in your dreams in the middle of the night and choke your wife to death, for example, as has happened on many an army base, or your child comes up behind you and taps you on the shoulder to say, "Hi, Daddy," and you turn quickly and punch him in the face with your fist, and in some cases, kill the child. All of those things have happened. And emotionally, we do the same thing. You continue. I moved my mother from one apartment to another over the weekend, and the PCSD shot up. Sure, because you're in a situation of increased stress. Just moving somebody anywhere, moving is stressful. And then way worse because you're moving your mother, who's the cause of the original PCSD. You say, it's amazing that once upon a time I was the sniveling little lamb, hating myself. Now my mother is afraid of me. Yesterday she said I was treating her like a child. Until very recently, she would have blasted back and fought to the death over whatever she said, proving that she was never the monster, It's just that when she was younger, she was stronger and had more tools to protect herself. And now if you're not careful, you're going to use the same tools and become just like her. So she's weaker now. She's not become more loving, just weaker and can't hold the tools of anger and arguing up as well as she used to. You can, but now you have a real choice. She never did. Just because you have a tool doesn't mean you have to use it. Just because you have a gun doesn't mean you have to carry it, much less shoot it. You said, I've spent several years building a crack mind and a swift attacking responsibility, pointing out hypocrisy, mistakes, and the flaws of my targets. My mother, who's approaching 81, can't even respond anymore. She knows I'll win. Gosh, sad, poignant. Old tools rust. All the behaviors we use to protect ourselves and to get temporary fulfillment, they all rust. With your mother, they've rusted. With you, eventually they'll rust. Love doesn't rust. In fact, it gets stronger. If you keep using the tools your mother gave you, you'll end up like her. If you increasingly pick up the tools of loving her, your wife, your daughter, you'll discover that you don't have room in your hand for both tools. Use the lasting tools. Use love, and the old ones will fall away. You won't need them. I know a woman who has frenetically sought people's approval all of her life. It was taught to her by her mother. She knew lots of ways to earn approval. Service, gifts, pleasing people. One of her many tools is talking. Always being of value. Having a role, an opinion. Talk, because the more you talk, the more valuable you feel. The more you convince yourself that people can't do without your talking. She asked me about what I had described regarding a year of my own life, early in my own recovery, when I decided I wouldn't talk. For about a year, I just didn't talk at all. I didn't offer my opinion. She asked me if she might benefit from it. And I said, yeah, probably would. So she did. And she said this. She wrote after experimenting with the no talking trial. She said, I'm learning a lot by being quiet. Mostly I'm learning about myself, but I'm also learning about the effects that others have on people when they talk to, at, or across them as I'm watching them. In other words, I'm seeing myself in these people as they talk. So what am I learning about me? I learned that being quiet was very difficult in the first few days, as I was just bursting to give my valuable insight or teaching to whoever was in a conversation. This taught me that I really was thinking about myself way more than I realized, and not truly listening to what was being said. That's a big one, to realize how selfish we are in our talking. It just killed me to learn that one. To see that I was talking to get attention. I wasn't talking to inform people. I was talking so they'd think well of me. She continues, I'm learning just how often I would have interrupted someone else or taken the conversation off to what I wanted to talk about before now. Kind of embarrassing, isn't it? You said, I'm learning that people talk and reveal themselves so much more when I'm quiet. I learned that too. There's a lot more to hear when we're actually not talking. You said, I'm learning that the world doesn't stop just because I don't get my point across. I hated that one. I thought my opinions were actually essential to a well-ordered world. I really did. When I went into drug treatment, after about the third or fourth morning, I realized that when I got up in the morning, the sun rose without my help. It was like humbling. I thought it was that important. You said, I'm learning that I'm no less worthwhile because I don't offer opinions, insights, or funny anecdotes. I'm worthy even when I say nothing. This is huge. And you could never learn this, that you are worthy, without proving it while you're talking. It's like I say to people who are addicts, you can't know what sobriety is like. You can't till you're sober. You can't learn what happiness is like till you quit using. You can't know what it's like to be loved unconditionally till you shut your mouth. If you feel worthwhile as you talk and contribute, which is very seductive, then you're trapped because you can't ever stop. You continue. I'm learning that people love to be heard, and when I'm quiet, I can hear what they're saying. I'm learning I don't need to jump in with a fixing, rescuing, or saving comment. Mostly, people just like to know that you're there and have time for them. It's astonishing to learn the ratio that's best of loving to teaching, isn't it? And it's not 1-to-1. Most of the time, the ratio of loving to teaching's more like 10-to-1, really. When people come here from all over the world so that I will teach them, I tend to teach them a little more than I would otherwise. But even then, the more time I spend with people, the less I'm talking. Even when they've given me that job to do. We can convey so much. Today, I sat on Skype with somebody and said nothing for 5 minutes. After 5 minutes, she said, I don't think I can take this anymore. I said, hang on a little longer. We'll see if you can. She said, this is kind of fun. I always have to fill the silence with something. I said, kind of like you're doing now. She closed her lips. And I finally said something. It was kind of nice, wasn't it? You didn't do anything to get me to love you. And yet, I did. And you felt it. Even though your lips weren't moving, mine weren't, even though you weren't doing anything, there was still a lot going on. She went, whoa. How would she have ever learned that unless she shut up? You continue. My final learning is that I really like this. I'm going to keep being quiet because I can't see why I wouldn't from now on. There are far too many loving benefits to me just shutting up around people and then expressing my acceptance in nonverbal ways and as few words as necessary. Good for you. It actually becomes fun. People call me, so I will talk. And even then, I'm just saying less and less, and people get uncomfortable in the beginning, but then they get to where they just really like it. In fact, 3 or 4 days ago, somebody called and said, can I just sit here while you go on about your work? Answer your emails, you know, whatever, so I can just sit and look at you, which is a little strange, and just feel you give me your time. Sure. So I sat and worked for, I don't know, 10 minutes. Then I quit working and just sat and looked at her for another 5. Probably didn't speak 10 words in 15 minutes. It's really calming. Here's somebody who says, I need your help for a coworker. I almost never answer these. You know, I have a friend who has a problem. But since she does work in this environment, sure, why not? So we got Susie and Nancy, who work in a very small workspace, about 8 by 12, so pretty small. They work at a counter greeting customers and booking reservations. So the space behind the counter is small. The room is larger and open. Nancy has a strong, very strong tobacco smoke smell. And Susie gets physically ill because of the intensity of the smell. Nancy only works 1 day a week, but when she does, it's always with Susie, the one that gets sick. Susie, sick, SS. Nancy's only worked 1 day and will be back this Friday, so they've only worked together this one time. Susie wants to feel better physically while working with Nancy. She doesn't know what to say or to do. She asked me, and I don't know either. There's no other workstation for Susie to position herself with. So what can be done? First, it's better if people can work out their own stuff instead of you stepping in. They get a sense of confidence from doing that. So you might suggest to Susie that she can talk to Nancy about the problem she's having. She could say to Nancy, Nancy, I know you don't mean to do this, and I'm not trying to get you to stop smoking, but when I'm around the smell of smoke, I can't help it. I get sick. Do you have any ideas for helping me with this? Give Nancy a chance to come up with a solution. If that can happen, you're going to have 2 women here who are going to be good friends. Be very cool for Nancy to think of her own solution. If Nancy can't come up with a solution, then you might help Susie to be prepared with some of her own. Like, for example, I'm just giving you a couple of examples of things she might say. I'm not trying to give you the solution, so don't offer it like that. But for example, you're not asking Nancy to not smoke, but you can ask Nancy to not smoke at all before she comes to that shift on the day that she works, or during that shift, even outside during breaks. That would minimize the smoking smell a bunch. You could see if that works. That might not be enough. And if that's not enough, then perhaps she could ask Nancy, she can't demand it, if after the last smoke she has before coming to work on a day with Susie, she could shower and possibly wear clothing that has been kept somewhere that it won't be soaked with smoke, so that Susie didn't have to deal with the smell. Is this love? It is. It's all loving. Loving isn't being a doormat. Nancy doesn't have the right to force her smoke smell on Susie. That's unloving. Now, the loving part is that Susie needs to do all of this with absolute kindness. No urgency, no tone of voice, no trying to control. The loving part is in the delivery. And it's loving to see the happiness of everybody who's involved. That's what's loving. Nancy doesn't need to smoke that one shift to be happy, whereas Susie's happiness is affected by feeling sick every time she's around that smell. So if Nancy can come up with the ideas, great. If Susie can come up with them and Nancy agrees to them, hallelujah. If neither of them can come up with something, well, then you might have to get a supervisor involved. But if you can do it in a kind and loving way, oh, the effect is so much more lasting, and these two can cooperate and work together better. A young woman talked to me about her upcoming marriage, and she asked me what I thought. Don't ask me what I think unless you really want to hear it. And so I said, well, tell me about him. She said, oh, well, he's nice and blah, 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 and he's cute, and I'm listening for something that really matters. Nothing. So I said, so how long have you been learning about real love? She said, well, a couple of months. I said, is he learning with you about real love? Since, you know, it's like the most important thing that you're going to have in your marriage. And she said, well, he said that he would try to read the books, but that he couldn't make any promises. If I were riding a horse, I would go, whoa, we're not going any steps further. What does that tell you, honey? You've told your future partner that this is important to you and that these principles can make all the difference in the world in your future marriage. And he says he can't make promises. I mean, do you want that lack of commitment in a partner? Really? Because he's given you a clue right here that he's not willing to commit to things that matter. Because this is the kind of guy, when you have a child with a guy like this, who's going to say, well, you know, I can't really make any promises, you know, about changing diapers or feeding the child or even paying attention to the child. Or in the cases of many men, later on they go, well, why should I have to take care of, really, I've heard this many times, your baby. This is the kind of guy who ends up saying that kind of thing. Really. If he can't commit to you, he's not going to commit to his child. So I'm just asking. I'm not telling you what to do, but this is a terrible warning sign. Pay attention to his real commitment to learning to love you. Words mean nothing. When he says to you, oh, I love you, baby, and you know he brings you flowers because it's Valentine's Day, you haven't learned a thing. He reveals his love in what he does. His simply saying he loves you, nothing. Or his saying that he wants a child, nothing. What matters is his willingness to become a loving partner. And where else is he going to learn that? I mean, if he's got a place to learn unconditional love other than real love, woohoo, go there. Really. I just don't know any places that teach that. So if he's not willing to do that and actually live it, you really want to be with him? You want to marry him? So pay attention. Choosing the right partner is the most important single decision you'll ever make. Do you hear me? More than anything. Not where you live, not what your career is, nothing. Not what church you join, I mean it. What partner you choose. And while you're not sure, when this guy's going, well, you know, I can't really promise. You sure don't want to marry him. You sure don't want to have a baby. It would be a huge mistake. So she writes me the next day. Apparently she took some of what I said seriously. She said, last night we didn't really talk because he wasn't ready. And I told him that I wanted to talk tonight, but I don't know what to say now that he says, well, I'm not ready. I can tell that he's angry and scared. Well, then this is pretty good information for you, isn't it, honey? He's a lot less ready for a loving relationship than you thought. That's all. So here you've asked him to talk about the possibility of studying real love, and he's angry and scared? Whoa, if that's all it takes to make him angry and scared, what's going to happen when you have a real conflict? What's going to happen when you have a child? So now you take steps. Don't be satisfied with less than real love in your life and in your relationship. So tell him that you know that he's angry and afraid. And when he's ready, you two really do have to talk about this. Tell him, if not today, then set a time within the next couple of days. Don't say later. Later never comes. You say, well, if you don't feel like talking about it now, how about Tuesday at 3:15? That's a commitment. And if he refuses to talk about it or keeps putting it off, that tells you a lot about what he thinks about it or how important it is to him. Your relationship. She continued. He told me this morning that I'm making him mad because I keep asking him questions, which I know isn't true because I've only asked him this one question. he's just using whatever he can think of as an excuse not to face his fears. He's blaming you already. This is before you get married. People who aren't married yet, who are thinking about long-term commitments, pay attention. If somebody isn't willing to study real love with you, if somebody is not willing to discuss the difficult things, have the difficult discussions now, before you're married, after you're married, you're never going to have these conversations. Because after marriage, there's a sense of ownership. It's like, well, I don't have to talk about it now because she's not going to walk out of the marriage. Where she might walk out as my girlfriend. So you just repeat that this discussion has to happen if you two want to have a relationship. Your relationship's too important not to have it. And if he persists in refusing, you have all the information you need about whether you want to continue in the relationship. She continues, I want a relationship. So what do? Well, I just told you. So she writes the next day. This is the very next day. So day 1 we talked, day 2, this is the 3rd day. I just told my fiance that I didn't want to get married right now, and I'm moving to live with my sister in another state. This is like a miracle. I can hear the angels singing, because rarely do people listen. They have this loving feeling, which is great in a song. You know, I've got that loving feeling. But it doesn't last. It's the real stuff that lasts, the unconditional stuff. And almost everybody, when I say, if he's not going to listen to you now, it's not going to happen later. And they go, oh, but I love him. He's such a nice guy. Yeah, well, who isn't? And then a year later, like the coach whose letter we read earlier, when everything's fallen to poop and they're swirling in the toilet, then they call you and say, well, we have a baby and we have one on the way, and our house is falling down, and he's a drug addict and watches porn 24/7. What do we do now? Nobody does anything about it at the time. So how smart are you? You said, I hadn't planned on telling him this at all, except that he asked me if I still wanted to go to the courthouse. To the courthouse. So this guy's hurrying up the wedding. And I asked him how soon. And he said, what do you mean? And I told him that I've been learning and growing a lot lately, and I think we need to work on making our relationship stronger before we start trying again. I'm impressed. He pretty much stopped talking, but I could tell he was angry, so I explained how he doesn't have to be angry all the time. And I know that he's angry because I've been there, where every little thing just irritates the hell out of you and pisses you off. And I said, it doesn't have to be like that. You can learn to be happy all the time. I told him, I can help you feel it too, but it's up to you. Whoa, kid, you've just gone crazy. You decided to be yourself. You decided that you're worth loving unconditionally. And you are. You don't have to settle for less than love in a relationship that you deserve. You listened. Then she continues, I left the room and went downstairs to write this, that I'm leaving him and moving in with my sister. Bless your heart. Keep remembering that you're worth truly loving. This is so cool. And the last thing she wrote was on a separate email. Okay, it's done. I'm leaving him. I'm going to live with my sister. She said, I'm scared as hell, but I know this is what I need and want. And then her last sentence was, can I call you? Of course she did. It's way easier to do the hard things. We've heard this theme actually repeatedly in tonight's video chat. It's way easier to do the hard things early than after things have become much, much more complicated. As yet another person told me just earlier today, he was in a relationship with a woman and realizing that she wasn't committed to learning to be unconditionally loving. And he said, this is really painful. He said, but I guess it's better to learn this early. I said, yeah, you can learn it now while you're dating, or you can learn it after 10 years and 3 kids. And he just beamed from ear to ear and he said, yeah, this is way easier. The laws of happiness are immutable, like the laws of physics. If we break them, we'll be miserable. If we break them longer, we'll be even more unhappy, and it gets harder to recover. So we need to find love, trust it, remember it, share it with other people, and we're guaranteed to be happy. We can do it. Talk to you more about it next week.